Today we wanted to discuss the use of data mining in the areas of AML compliance. We'll talk about some of the ideas which are currently being used in data mining to aid efforts such as fraud detection, as well as a few other techniques which you can also use to improve a number of existing processes and the various benefits that they can bring to your organization. So just to tell you a little bit about us before we begin. I work as a business analyst for SYMPTAI Consulting Limited, who are the regional partners for caseware analytics in the Caribbean. We're an IT consulting firm who provide consultancy services in areas of IT audit and IT security, as well as offer business assurance services based on various client needs. And it's through our partnership with Caseware we've implemented a number of different caseware solutions throughout the Caribbean, with many of them having a great focus on creating solutions to help combat challenges within areas of AML compliance. Now, as we're going to go through today's topics, we're going to want to establish an understanding of just what data mining is from at least a basic level before we can start talking about the various techniques that we can use and exactly how they work. We'll also discuss some of the challenges that we face when talking about AML compliance, how we look to overcome those challenges with these same techniques, as well as the benefits of incorporating even one data mining technique into your existing compliance programs. So, when talking about data mining, we're talking about a fairly new concept as far as how to use information to help us make decisions. And in this case, the information we're heavily relying on is typically our own. It's data that we already have and already exists within our organizations. So, usually when trying to use data to solve a problem, the data we want tends to be disjointed, meaning that we're not talking about using data necessarily from one place or a single source, and sometimes that can be a real challenge for us. For example, if we're trying to identify potential cases of collusion within a business, we've got a number of factors to consider. Firstly, we're going to need a data source for whatever suspicious transactions we'd like to look at to see those details about the various activities that are taking place. Then as we continue, we might want to access customer records to be able to link those suspicious transactions to the details of the customers who may or may not be involved. And of course, since we are investigating possible collusion, we may also want to find it necessary to investigate any employees or staff members who may have been involved and look at their activity as well. You want to see who or what they've been interacting with in terms of the transactions and the audit history of their activity across all the various systems in your organization. And you'll be looking for any deviations or any unusual patterns that you might find. Well, here's the good news. All this different information that you need, it's probably available. You don't need to worry about you may or may not have it. You probably do. It's all within your systems. But unfortunately, to get all of it might be a problem. Getting all that information can become very tedious and very time-consuming. These many different requests may end up spanning a number of different systems and subsystems, which only makes it harder to retrieve. And in all that time that you're now waiting on data so you can start investigating, not only can you not do your investigation, but in that time, there are other potential cases of fraud that can be happening while you're waiting. Now, with data mining, you're able to take information from all these different sources and combine them together in such a way that you not only have easy access to the information, but you're able to quickly learn from it and gain new insights through the use of data models. So, to continue, in today's world, we're experiencing a problem. It's a sort of phenomenon that we're going to call the data explosion problem. Now, technology has advanced so rapidly over the last couple of decades, and with those advancements, we've been able to basically generate so much data that we have no idea what to do with it. We've become experts in ourselves at collecting data on almost anything and everything that happens in our societies. But we're not really able to do much with it at the time, until now. Data mining allows us to finally put all that data to good use by managing large data sets and analyzing them to gain new insights that we can use to better respond to threats, quickly identify new opportunities, and even gain a competitive edge. Now, in 1982, John Naisbitt described a problem that he thought we could have in the future, where he said, "We're drowning in information, but starved for knowledge." And I think the reality is very true. Except today, the problem is more that we're drowning in data, but we're starved for insight. And ultimately, this is the problem that we're trying to solve with data mining. With every day that technology changes, it becomes harder and harder to not only keep up to date with those changes internally, but also to protect ourselves from the threats that come with it. Technology has introduced new types of fraud and new types of threats that are not only harder to detect, but can have huge impact on an organization in an instant. Our experienced analysts can only work so many cases a day, and sometimes we just don't have the manpower or resources to keep ourselves fully covered against these threats at all times. So now that we have an idea of the effects of data mining, how does it affect us in a real-life scenario? So I'm going to give you guys an example. So let's say we're a compliance manager, and we work for an organization that has recently come under fire for accusations of being involved in money laundering crimes. So one day, you're greeted by members of law enforcement who tell you they're investigating activities of one of your customers, one of your trusted clients who's being accused of having illicit activity through accounts that they hold with you, and are challenging you about your role in facilitating those crimes. Now let me show you who this client is. Today, her name is STACY Valdez, a 72-year-old retired nurse and longtime trusted client. Are you kidding me, right? This is not the profile of someone who should be accused of funding illegal weapons. It just doesn't make any sense. So having given the facts, these are things that come to us. We only have one option at this point, which is to react. So obviously we can't leave the issue here. Let's do some due diligence. Now we've been investigating STACY's activities against our different controls to see if we can find anything suspicious, anything that may ring a bell. But we still don't see any sign of STACY on any of our usual alerts. So far, this is not a good look. We can't necessarily tell law enforcement that there is no reason to suspect STACY, when obviously they've come to us with probable cause that STACY herself is involved in these crimes. Now we have to ask ourselves, what exactly are we missing? We've looked against all of our usual means of detection, and right now we're drawing blanks against what should now be considered a known threat. It's not just what we're missing, but it's what we aren't looking for. And that is a new angle that we're going to take. So let's see how data mining could help in a situation like this. Now, we want to use data mining, but first, what do we have to do? How do we get started? So when you're just introducing data mining to an organization, there are 5 main steps I'd like you to consider. And firstly, you have to decide on what are our business objectives. You have to ask yourself, what are you trying to achieve? Maybe you'd like to use data analytics to improve your risk management strategies. Or maybe identify new customer trends or customer patterns to help aid in customer retention. Or maybe you're just having challenges with things like data quality, and you'd like to create a campaign to continually clean and improve the data circulating in your organization. These are just a few of the common objectives I've seen over the years working with technology. There are many different ways in which data mining can help you, but not all of them have the same requirements. A clear objective will help in managing not only the resources you have, but it also helps to validate the value of the type of insight you're looking to gain. And once you've gained and decided what you want and what you need to think about is the data and where you can find it. Now, your data can range from large data sets, large data tables stored in core business application systems to a series of Excel spreadsheets that you keep on your desktop or on your department shared drive. I mean, after all, you've identified the different sources, and now if you find them, you can set up different data streams. You know where they are, and you know that you're going to consistently need this information. So just set it up where you need to be able to get a consistent feed of that data. This way you can have it when you need it, so access is no longer an issue, and it's always ready and always up to date. Next, we need to understand the data that we know that we have in front of us. Here is where typically a data scientist would usually spend most of their time, assessing the state of the data. How does it relate to each other? How complete is it? How do we want to treat the different values or different codes that we're seeing in front of us? A lot of the time, data is not necessarily clean or pretty, and it just takes a lot of time and a lot of effort to really understand what it is that you have in front of you, understand the value that you can get from the data that you have. Because if you find any gaps, now is the time to address them. If you find any data issues or any incorrect values, now is the time to find it. Because you might find that you might not have as much usable data as you originally thought. But once we prepared our data sets, we can finally start to think about our data model. Now, how do we decide which data model to use? There are actually many to choose from, and they all do different things. This is an extremely important part as you want to use a model that best suits your objective. So of course, this requires research. You need to be knowledgeable on the different effects of the different models, and we'll discuss a few of them today and see some of the effects that they have. Now we've decided on our model, and we're ready to build something that you can actually test. Now, your model will need to be tested and validated. This is a rigorous but necessary step, but it is crucial because over time, like everything, your business needs will change, and you're going to want to make adjustments to ensure that it's adapting with not only the changes that are happening in your business, but also the changes in the threats, changes in your environment. You're going to want to ensure that what you're building today is sustainable for the long-term future. And this is something you're going to want to make into a continuous process to ensure that you're getting the best results out of your model for longer periods of time. Now, this brings me to one of the many data models that we're going to look at today. The first one is called anomaly detection. So essentially what this is that it allows you to look at any group of data, whether that be a set of customers, transactions, or even a combination of the two, and the model will analyze the information for you that you feed it and identify different patterns in the information. Now these patterns are based on all the different data elements that you provide to the model. So obviously in cases like this, the more information you can feed it is the better and more precise the results. And these patterns, what they'll come out to be is that they're going to show you what would be considered normal or expected behavior based on just simply what the data says, no additional parameters. And what you might find also is that while some of the individuals that you're analyzing might have what's considered normal or expected behavior, you might also find deviations or certain exceptions. These are just pieces of data that in particular might stand out, and that is what we'd consider the anomaly or the outlier in this process. It's just something that simply does not fit as well as the others. the model will be able to tell you which customer activity looks unusual simply based on an expected customer pattern on the data that you fed it. So this is a model that's commonly used in a number of fraud detection strategies because of its quick ability to identify unusual behavior without requiring that you tell it a concrete definition of what is considered fraud. The fraud is simply identified through the use of the patterns and the unusual behavior that it finds in those patterns. So as you can expect, if the data that you feed it changes, so does what it considers a normal or usual pattern of behavior. So you're not just looking for one particular type of fraud anymore. You're now looking for various types of fraud simply based on what can be considered fraudulent and non-fraudulent behavior. Now another technique used is called clustering. And clustering is very similar to anomaly detection in its ability to pattern match, except rather than single out anomalies, it's simply showing you how certain networks or groups are related based on the data that you feed it. Unbiased and purely data-driven. The clusters that form could represent any number of different patterns or related groups. Clustering is very effective in performing things such as crime analysis to identify patterns in where, when, how, or even the different occurrences of crimes can occur. With this sort of information, you can make more informed decisions around how to treat various regions based on the different types of criminal activity, or devise risk mitigation strategies aimed at certain types of activities within different regions to reduce the occurrence of those crimes. So maybe instead of always having to respond to certain types of fraud, you might think, okay, I want to maybe try and predict when is the next outcome of fraud going to occur and who is going to be doing it. What does that person look like? Well, for that, we have something called neural nets or neural networks. This is a model that is designed to help in predicting decisions based on past behavior, where it actually aims to learn from the data that you feed it and improve its performance based on pattern matching. So as you know, people are often considered creatures of habit. And it's true. When you do something once and it tends to work, obviously that makes you more likely to do it again. Using elements of machine learning, you would now be able to take what knowledge you already know about fraud, about fraudulent activity and those customers, and create a model that can begin to predict those incidents of fraud actually before they occur. These are particularly useful in helping detect fraud very early while trying to minimize the number of false positives, because instead of using thresholds and instead of using barriers, you're using patterns to identify the fraud. So now when a fraudster looks to change their tactics, a richly trained neural net can be used to not only detect but adapt to their changes in pattern and behavior. Now, just looking at the technology, we can start to see the benefits of just what we can do with each of these techniques, of which I've only named a few. There's so many out there. Each looks to solve a different problem in a different way that we wouldn't be able to do. And they all have the ability to process information more quickly to help us learn new insights and make these better informed decisions. Now that we've seen a few models and what exactly they do, how about we apply one of them to our case with STACY Valdez? So in this case, let's apply the anomaly detection model to our incident. Now, through using anomaly detection on her customer activity, we can identify several patterns in her activity, as well as now trace that pattern through the history of her accounts. So, what are some of the things we can find? When she decided to reactivate her account, we can see her transactional patterns. in terms of the value of the transactions, the frequency, and even infer on where she was doing those transactions. All of this was provided to us through the data that we already had in our systems. But otherwise, would many hours of work to potentially identify all these various patterns in STACY's activity. Our model was able to do this for us. Not only faster, but using an automated, data-driven process. We would have been alerted much earlier and would then be able to take action. So now we've learned something new about STACY. But what else can we learn? Our model was not only able to identify these patterns for STACY, but now we can also now take that pattern that we found for STACY and use it to identify other customers who might be found to use similar activity. Now this activity is closer to clustering. Now, as the saying goes, misery does love company. And it's rare that incidents of fraud are isolated events. There's usually a trail or a set of persons who are connected as targets with similar incidents and patterns to their fraud. These are the types of things that are happening, undetected and flying under the radar. It's not only unlikely that someone with STACY's profile would be involved in these crimes, but even more unlikely that there's an entire group of persons like her actually doing it. Now, it's possible with further investigations that this could be a case of maybe elderly abuse, where our customers' accounts have just simply been compromised and they've become victims to this crime. And had it been left unseen for much longer, more of our customers could have been victims and be at risk while fraudsters are using us to fund their crimes. And for all we know, this is only the tip of the iceberg. Data mining is powerful, and it's being used not just in fraud, but almost every industry globally. Wherever there is data, there can be an application for data mining. So many various things are being done today, and a number of different industries are getting involved, and they're able to find new information and use data in ways that they themselves didn't think were possible. One of the biggest benefits I've seen through data mining is in the area of healthcare. And in healthcare, it's actually being used to help diagnose patients in detecting illness by looking at patients with similar symptoms and the outcomes of those patients. So what is it doing? It's looking at the patterns in not only their diagnoses and their symptoms, but the projected outcomes of those patients. And we're using that information to actually help to predict different illnesses, from predicting things like heart attacks to diagnosing cancer patients at an early stage. We're actually now using data to enrich our lives rather than simply just collect it. Now, regardless of your industry, there are some problems that will occur universally. Whether we want to tackle the challenge of data quality, you can use data mining to help clean data by identifying common typing errors. Or maybe you want to look into artificial intelligence to see how you can use machine learning and different structures to not only optimize but adapt a number of different operations. As the world is moving forward in technology, more and more of our processes look to get more automated so we can do more with less. And artificial intelligence is one of the best ways to do it. Data mining even looks to make more responsive and more insightful dashboards to help not only improve the quality of the reports, but also generate them much faster, just making it a breeze. The technology brings with it so many possibilities, allowing us to learn and process information faster than ever, leveraging more data than we ever could before. Now, as we look towards the end of the presentation, I hope you were able to get a better understanding as to not only some of the benefits of data mining, but see how effective it can really be when in use. So before I hand it over, I'd just like to encourage everyone to remember to embrace your data so you can maybe regain your insight.